Are we ready? Are we good? Hey, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to our 5 ways to supercharge your STEAM program with littleBits. We are super excited to have you guys here. This is going to be a great webinar. We have 2 amazing guests. It's going to be really fun. So if you've never joined us before, again, welcome. We're so glad you're here. And if you have, you guys are in for a treat. So first, I'm going to do a few housekeeping things, just tell you how this is going to work a little bit, and then we'll really get into the meat of what we're going to talk about. So first, we are going to be recording this webinar so we can share it with other people who couldn't attend, and it will be viewable afterwards. We'll send that to you. We'll send that link to you in an email afterwards, and you can feel free to share it. And we will also have a question and answer period at the end. So we'll have our 2 presenters talk about the STEAM student set and their STEAM program, and then we'll do some Q&A. So if you do have a question, go to the question section in your GoToWebinar portal and just type it in right there. Okay, next, if you're having any technical difficulties, throw them in the chat. We'll try and help you get things working as soon as possible. And we have a really great person on hand to help us do that. Okay, so next we have a really special offer for you guys at the end of the webinar, so don't leave, stay tuned. All right, cool, let's get started. Okay, so as I said, we have 2 great speakers. First, we have Dave Sharp, who is a product designer at littleBits. And I'll just read a quick bio and then I'll let you guys do some more formal introductions. So Dave was instrumental in the development of the new STEAM student set, and he spent hours in classrooms really working with teachers and students to see what worked and what didn't as he designed this kit. And he is also an expert makerspace teacher himself. So that's Dave. And next we have Michael Wilkinson, who is a math and science teacher from Fieldston Lower School. And Michael teaches grades 3 through 5, math and science in the Bronx in New York, and he's an educational consultant to NASA Education. So super excited to have you guys here. I guess I should also, I jumped the gun a little bit. My name is Liza Stark. I work on the community team here at littleBits. And I also have a little bit of a background in engagement education and makerspaces. So let's get started. I'm going to pass it off to you, Dave.
Okay.
And we'll get going. So ready, and here we go.
All right. So, great. So I'm going to give a little bit of overview of the STEAM student set and talk about 5 ways you can use littleBits to supercharge your STEAM program. Just making sure to click through. There we go. So what I'll cover a quick overview of some of the issues in STEAM education now, an introduction to littleBits and how it works, a brief talk about why STEAM and its relationship to STEM, and then I'll talk about the 5 ways to supercharge your STEAM program. So to start with, I think some of the issues currently facing STEM and STEAM education is kids are high users of technology. They got phones, computers, games, but there is a very low understanding and mastery among those kids on how to use them. They're consumers, but not necessarily creators with those tools. And so it really sets up a high barrier of entry to those technical fields that involve STEM subjects. But at the same time, these are things that kids are super involved with and super eager to get that mastery. And then there also it's certainly an issue in STEM education that it is not reaching all of our learners. So girls, students of color, low-income students are persistently underrepresented in STEAM activities and STEAM offerings. And then finally, jobs of tomorrow, they're going to require sort of creativity and innovation. We don't necessarily know what these jobs are and what the demands are going to be, but we know that it's going to require a lot of creativity, a lot of flexibility, and a lot of quick thinking. So that brings us to littleBits and our mission, which is to empower everyone to create inventions, large and small, with our platform of easy-to-use electronic building blocks. And so these are littleBits. It is a growing library. We have a team of engineers that is constantly working to create new bits to add. So steadily growing the capabilities of what littleBits can do. Right now we have over 70 bits. A quick overview of how it works. So as you can see right off the bat, all the bits are color-coded. So it's a very easy way to distinguish the function of a bit. So blue are power. Pinks are going to be inputs like buttons and sliders and environmental sensors. Orange are going to be wire and logic. So those are ways of connecting different bits together, splitting signals, extending. And finally, green is output. Those are the bits that do something. They light up, they buzz, they move. So those are all of the outputs. All of the littleBits connect together with magnets, which makes them really easy to put together. There's no soldering, there's no fidgeting with small connections or clips. And one of the important things about the magnets is that means that your bits always go together the right way. If you're trying to put things together backwards, the magnets will just repel, which makes it a really easy system for the kids to openly experiment with and explore. Also, we want to say that it is a growing ecosystem. So we integrate with a lot of different platforms. So IFT is a web service that connects to Twitter and Facebook. NASA has a channel on IFT. So a lot of ways for kids to get engaged in different content online. We have our own Arduino bit, which is a programmable microcontroller. We have connections with Lego so that students can use littleBits to have Lego creations come to life. We have a makey bit. We have also a user who's created an extension that allows you to integrate Scratch with littleBits, and we've also been working on a Minecraft plugin that's available now. It allows you to essentially bridge the gap between the totally screen digital experience of Minecraft and begin to bring it into the real world with littleBits. So I want to talk a little bit about the platform that we have. This is a great quote from Mitch Resnick, who's the head of lifelong kindergarten at MIT. The best technologies have low floors, that is, they provide easy ways to get started, high ceilings, they support complex projects, and wide walls, they appeal to a wide variety of people. littleBits is one of the rare products that succeeds along all three dimensions. It is a construction kit for everyone, even for people who didn't think they'd be interested in construction kits. So I want to unpack that a little bit. When Mitch was talking about low floors and high ceilings, one of the things that's really important to us at littleBits is that there is a low floor. It is very accessible for students, very approachable and easy to understand and really get mastery of those basics. Things like lights and sounds and switches and motion. But that doesn't mean that kids are going to get bored once they've gotten a grasp of that. It's almost a stepping stone, you might say. So they can, after getting those basics, can move on to working with environmental sensors. We have bits that include basic programming and logic, coding, cloud, sort of Wi-Fi development. So it is a platform that really can grow with them and can offer students in, all the way from elementary up to higher education, a space to work. And it's also the width of the walls. This isn't just something for your science class or your math class, but that it really is applicable across the curriculum and across the disciplines. We really view littleBits as a material. It's something that you can build with, and the ability to build and express yourself and explore ideas is important across all of the areas that we teach. So why STEAM, and how does it relate to STEM? So the A in STEAM represents art and design. And the essential concept here is that art and design brings a much needed, you might say a much needed right brain to the STEM disciplines. And it is we view it as more than just including paint and crafts, but art and design brings with it a whole set of cognitive skills, divergent thinking, brainstorming, And so those we feel those play a very essential role in bringing STEM to life and in helping kids really dig deep into the topics that they're looking at. So now I'm going to move on to the 5 ways to supercharge your STEAM program with littleBits. The first that we want to talk about is instilling a growth mindset in students. And so it's really important to us that students can become comfortable with uncertainty, comfortable with failure, and really viewing those two things as an essential part of the learning process. It's by trying something out and finding out why it worked or why it didn't work that's going to connect them and help them understand. And so it's something that is built into the very hardware of littleBits. It's something, we really encourage students to explore the bits and how they work without this slew of instructions and rules for how they work. It's something they can explore. They'll try and put it together in different ways, and they'll realize that certain orders of circuits work better and certain arrangements do different things. And so it allows them to explore openly in that way. And it also is an important part of how we framed all of our lessons and challenges, is that they are, the openness of them is an important ingredient that allows them to, and we really encourage them to explore and try a lot of different things. Next element is providing a scaffolding for teachers and students. As I mentioned sort of before, littleBits is a platform that can really grow. And we, in order to support teachers and support students, we've worked hard to create a clear process or scaffolding which helps teachers understand littleBits and introduce it to their students and take them to areas where they can be doing really complex and powerful lessons and challenges. So there's 3 things I'm going to sort of give examples of how we do that. First is in the ways we introduce littleBits. So we have 2 lessons that come with the STEAM student set that are all about ways that you introduce the littleBits concepts to your students. And the same thing with the invention cycle. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about what the invention cycle is in a moment. And then we also have lessons that are, it's built around guided challenges. And so this is an important way sort of to introduce our challenge format to students and give them a sort of structure to explore how they work. So just a quick example of introducing a littleBits to your students. Every STEAM student that comes with an invention guide. In that invention guide, each bit has its own page. We talk about what the bit is, how it works. We give an example circuit. We provide real-world analogies which help the students connect what that individual bit is and what it does to something in the real world. So they begin to see that this circuit board, this bit in front of me, isn't just an abstract thing, but it represents ingredients that are in all of the machines and electronics and devices around me. And then we also have, as you see on the bottom left-hand corner, a mini challenge. And so that mini challenge is one of the ways we've found that it's a great way to introduce students to what the bit is and how it works. Rather than saying this is a light sensor and this is how it works, give them some sort of a framework to explore and say, hey, can you invent something that moves when the lights go out? And then giving them the time to explore the bits and how they go together and how they can use the light sensor to make that happen. The next thing I want to talk about is the invention cycle. And the invention cycle really is the backbone of our challenges. And the invention cycle is composed of 4 parts: create, play, remix, and share. And we developed the invention cycle essentially by looking at the design process and the engineering design process, and then looking at how kids naturally play, and then drawing connections between those 2 things so that we could use essentially a language that the kids understand to say, hey, these are the types of activities you're already doing. see how they relate to what engineers do, scientists do, designers do, and so that it's not something that is foreign to them, but really saying that this is something you're already doing. We're gonna sort of provide a name and a framework for it. So create is all about just getting started. You might not know the right answer at first or how you're going to solve the problem at first, but you're going to build something just to be able to start out and get the ball rolling. And then with play is really about testing. Play is about using it and seeing what are the results of what I created, what worked, what didn't work, what's fun about it, what gets me most excited about what I've created. And then remix is where they start to really experiment and improve. And so it's taking what they've created and played with and what they've learned through play and starting to say, well, what if I changed an element? What if I added this? Or perhaps I could improve or fix this by adding a different bit and using a different motor. And then finally, share. Share is an important element because share is, in part, when they sort of collect their story about their process and why they made it and figure out how can I communicate that to someone else? How can I communicate the value of my invention or what I learned through my process? And how can I, once I've told this story, how do I get feedback from other people and incorporate that feedback? So an example of our guided projects. So for example, this is a challenge to invent a throwing arm. And it will start with really basic instructions for building their first prototype. And that's because oftentimes when kids are first starting out using littleBits, it can be helpful to give the challenge a little bit of a jump start. And so instructions for how to build their very first prototype, a lot of information on how that prototype works, how the circuit is functioning, how different changes could be made with the settings and what those would do. And then we encourage them to play with their first prototype and learn about it. And then this is where, from here, it really is where they diverge and they make it their own and they explore different possibilities. And we have built in, with the invention guide and the lessons, a framework that the students and teachers can use with prompting questions that can help sort of spur the creative process and encourage them to explore different things. And then also a whole collection of different ways to share their invention. Next thing I want to talk about, the third, is the importance of building projects around real-world issues, and in particular, ideas and concepts that really connect with and that the students can connect with and relate to. So that they're not just doing this as an abstract exercise, but they see this invention process, this invention cycle, as a tool that they can use to make a change, invent something important to them, or make a difference in someone's life. So those are embodied by the open challenges, which are in the invention guide, and also by the lessons which accompany those open challenges. And then we also encourage students and teachers to create their own lessons and challenges. And so in one of the schools we've been working with, we have actually had a student who came forward to her teacher and she said, I want to start running design challenges for my fellow students. Once a month, I want to put up on our class poster board a design challenge and then see if all my classmates can, what their entries are in the design challenge. So a couple of examples. On the left is a group of students or a student from a school. They were doing a sort of entrepreneurship challenge, an Invent for Good challenge, where they had to actually create a product that affected the life of someone else, and then they stood up and essentially did their sort of startup product pitches for the rest of the class and a panel of judges. On the right is an entry for one of our most recent online design challenges, which is Invent for Good. And these are two sisters, and they created this amazing bat echolocation device, which can sense if there are objects in front of it. And so they essentially using sort of modeled after the echolocation of bats, they created a device that helps people who are seeing impaired navigate their world. And then this one, which just came in yesterday, a really exciting project. So this student won his school science fair with a project called Social Cat, which uses littleBits. And so the issue that he was trying to solve is that a lot of cats that come into shelters aren't socialized to humans, which makes them very hard to adopt. And so a lot of cats aren't getting adopted, not finding homes. And so with littleBits, he created a circuit. When the cats come up to eat out of their food bowl, it senses the cats are near and plays quiet, soothing human voices. So the cats begin to associate these human voices with food, and through that become more comfortable with humans and more socialized towards humans, which makes them more adoptable. An amazing, amazing project. We're really excited to see that. So the open challenges that are in the STEAM student set, we have Hack Your Classroom, which encourages students to improve their school environment and find ways that they can make it even more exciting, even more engaging. Invent for Good then asks them to take the idea of improving an environment and instead of focusing on themselves, look towards someone else, a friend, a relative, really anyone who, and encourages them to empathize and think about how they could create an invention that improves that other person's life. Chain reaction contraption is inspired by Rube Goldberg. So it gets kids to create these Rube Goldberg machines using littleBits and everyday objects around the classroom. And then finally, Hack Your Habits is a challenge that revolves around gathering data. So at first, creating a circuit that counts sort of an everyday habit, the number of times you have to go back to your locker because you've forgotten the books, the number of times someone throws recycling away, the number of times you raise your hand. And then the sort of level up part of the challenge is how can you change your invention to help improve that behavior. So for example, could you create an invention that will make people recycle more often? And then be able to collect data and say, hey, yes, this new invention that I did using my littleBits counter, I was able to find out that yes, in fact, it did improve people's recycling habits. So a quick example of what those look like in our invention guide introduces the challenge and gives them a basic concept. So here's our Invent for Good. Similar to how we saw with the guided challenges, there are a lot of prompting questions to get them to probe different areas of their thinking and sort of help guide them through this invention process, encouraging them to test it, suggesting different things that they can try to explore for remixing, and then talking about different ways that they could share this idea and gather feedback from friends. A very important element of the STEAM student set is how it connects with curriculum, and in particular with standards. And so from the very beginning of developing the STEAM student set, we were looking closely at the next generation science standards, in particular the engineering, science and engineering practices and the engineering design standards. And so meeting those standards has really been built into the structure of the kit. And so just as an example, the invention cycle is really a critical element here. So on the right, you'll see the create, play, remix, share, the four phases of the invention cycle. And on the left, you'll see the NGSS practice standards. And so these are really habits or methodologies that NGSS has determined are important to be throughout your curriculum and really in every learning experience. And so the invention cycle really maps to these practice standards. We've also, this is something that's in the teacher's guide, which I'll talk about in a second, but We've also made connections between each one of our lessons and the different next generation science standards which they connect with. So there is a chart in here that you can look through in the teacher's guide to get a sense of how we're making those connections and which ones you can meet. The invention log is essentially a student workbook or a journal, if you will, that students use throughout the invention process. It is really modeled off of the engineering design practices, and it is an important tool not only for getting students to reflect on their process and how they're going through the invention cycle, but also offers a really helpful tool for formative assessment, being able to actually have a window into how the students are thinking as they're going through this process. So the final way is ensuring that teachers have support and training. This is a great quote from educator Lisa Wang, who is a teacher at the Marymount School here in New York. So sometimes people think STEAM just means adding paint to science projects. It's not. It's about mixing the left brain and the right brain, making the study of math and science more visual and creative, and seeing things more openly. And so one of the things that's important to us is provide enough information that's going to help teachers make those connections and come up with strategies for mixing the left brain and the right brain in these lessons. So in addition to what comes in the kit, we have a 130-page teacher's guide, which talks about a lot of what I've talked about today. It really maps out those curricular connections. It explains the invention cycle and how it connects to different learning goals, and has a whole section on different strategies for implementing the invention cycle, so that it allows you to really customize each lesson and make sure that you're really meeting the unique needs of your students. We also have a lot of resources online, in addition to the teacher's guide, and a lot of case studies that can help you see how other teachers have used littleBits in the classroom, in libraries, in after-school maker programs, as a way to really give inspiration for the different ways that littleBits can be implemented. We also have a online PD course, so it's 6 hours of instruction. It's in 5 different modules, which you can do at your own pace. And by the end of this course, it walks you through an introduction to littleBits, an introduction to how littleBits incorporates with STEAM, lots of examples on different lessons and activities. And at the end, the final module helps outline different ways that you can create your own lessons using littleBits or incorporate littleBits into your existing lessons. And there is a PDU certificate upon completion. So that is my last slide. So I'm going to pass back to Liza.
Ready.
Change. Liza, I believe it is back to you.
All right. Wonderful. There we go. Okay, so Dave, thank you so much. That was a wonderful overview of everything that's sort of encapsulated within the STEAM students. And I'm now so excited to hear from Michael about what he's done with STEAM and how he's incorporated into his curriculum and his work with students. So, without further ado, Michael, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Okay.
I'm going to do it in 1 second. Here we go. All right. And boom. Wait, boom. Okay.
Okay. I'm default on the showing, sorry.
No worries.
There we go.
We can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me? Okay, so
Yeah.
did you see the screen yet?
No, not yet.
It's not going to my screen.
Let's see. It's not sharing your screen?
No, when I go, it's not allowing me to share. Let me pass off, and then maybe you can pass back. Let me see if I can pass presenter back, because it doesn't seem to be responding.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
I'm getting beach balls when I click anything on the screen sharing command.
Beach ball of death is never a good sign. If it's beach ball, are you using Keynote, PowerPoint? Sorry,
No,
guys, there's always
Google Slides.
difficult. Okay, so maybe if you want to try passing it back to me and then closing out of the presentation and then reopening it.
Yeah, it's not even letting me pass back to you.
Well, maybe would it make sense to email your presentation maybe to one of us, and then maybe we can try and bring it up for you?
Sure, we can try that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so in the meantime, you guys, I will say that, so Dave was talking about these open challenges, and he was talking about sharing as the last part of the invention cycle. And we have a bunch of teachers who run these challenges, who have been running these open challenges in their classrooms, and then sharing them within our littleBits community and posting them online to our invent page. And it's a great way to spotlight and showcase student work. And I will throw, it looks like Michael jumped off for a second. Totally cool. I will throw the link to that in the chat right now. And actually, we are starting to use all of the challenges in the STEAM student set guide as part of our monthly challenges. You don't need the STEAM student set to do the monthly challenges, though we do recommend it. So right now the monthly challenge is Invent for Good, and we have a lot of great projects like the ones that Dave showed. And next month, we haven't announced it yet, but I'll give you a hint. It might have a little something to do with how you behave. Okay, so you can find our that page here. So now we're going to take a quick question while we wait for Michael. So let's see. Which one should I choose? I'm going to go with this one. So Dave, while we've got you on the line and waiting for Michael, so can you give us some more specifics about how to use littleBits in the classroom, I'm assuming? Or maybe examples of how you've seen it used with teachers, things that you've heard from them, maybe things that worked really well, things that didn't work so well.
Sure. I think something that comes to mind sort of immediately is what I said earlier about littleBits really being another material and a powerful material. And so seeing how teachers have taken lessons that they've already been doing and have incorporated littleBits into them to add a whole another dimension and to bring STEAM into the lesson. So there was a school that every year the students would do a series of board games in each one of their classes.
Okay,
so,
terribly sorry. Everything crashed. So you want to try again?
Yeah, so we'll put that question on hold.
Sure.
It sounds like a really good answer, and we'll come back to it. I promise, whoever asked that. So, Michael, let's see, who...
Do you want to run it from there, Lisa, since I see you have it up? Or is that me on the underlay here? That's me. Okay.
Yeah. So, let's see. Who has ownership right now? I do. Okay, so I'm going to, let's see, it doesn't look like, okay.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so you have it now. There we go.
All right.
there it is.
There it is? Okay, here we go. Sorry about that, folks. As Lee's already said, I teach 3rd through 5th grade math and science at Fieldston Lower School, and it's in the Bronx. We're a private independent school. Our division, the lower school, is pre-K through 5, and we've got about 150 students. So it's on the small side, but it's a very exciting environment to be working in. And I want to share a little bit about my journey with littleBits, some of the curriculum development I've done around that, and how my students have been making use of this resource. The littleBits, I discovered them several years ago. I was invited to come downtown and play around with them with a bunch of teachers and see what the potential was. And for me, the first thing I was struck with was that these were really a very organic material, and is how I kind of coined them. And what I mean by an organic material, it's something like, for those teachers who know what Cuisenaire rods or pattern blocks are, or things like calculators, pencils, rulers, they don't have just one particular use. Bingo chips, building blocks, they're very organic in that they can get used in a multitude of ways and get used in the ways in which students see most fit. Yes, there are prescribed lessons that many people use with these various materials, but the power of them comes when they're in bins in the room where students can just go and help themselves when they have a problem to solve and make use of those materials as they see fit. And littleBits really fit into that paradigm for my classroom. That I could see that this was the first electronics material that required minimal instruction and since it didn't require the soldering and wiring, still allowed children to experiment with electronic circuitry in very legitimate ways, and it had the potential of integrating these electronics into other projects. That it didn't just have to be something unto itself. There were several different project ideas that were in the literature, but really a very open-ended material that really, it's just, your imagination is the only limitation to what can be done with them. And my students are always coming up with new ways of using them. Part of what helps is having a culture in your school, or at least in your classroom, where students expect to be able to work like this, to have the power to make decisions, to share their ideas, to ask questions, and that it is a safe place in which one can fail. That if you don't have a space to fail, you're not going to figure anything new out. That's just the bottom line with that. And so you've got to create an environment where children get accustomed to that, both in the act of failure and then breaking it down, figuring out what went wrong and how they can get over that, but also being someone in support of that failure. It's not an opportunity to ridicule somebody or get up on somebody just because they're down. This is a place where you can really rally together as a community and share ideas, and maybe you've had successes that will help them get through their failure, and vice versa. So there's this community of learners that we really work to foster at our school. Additionally, at the lower school, we've really developed a STEAM ethic. And we've gone so far as to a major capital campaign and construction project that gets initiated at the end of this school year, where we are going to renovate the entire top floor of our building, and that it will next year house all of the STEAM disciplines. There will be 2 math science labs. We'll have our wood shop up there, our music room, our art room, and what we call our social studies workshop, which is where children go to do a variety of projects related to their social studies topics that they're exploring that year: handicrafts, cooking, weaving, quilting, a wide range of things like that. So having all of those disciplines in one place, and then in the middle of that having an open room that all of these rooms open into, that work can spill out into and create natural opportunities for integration between the disciplines. We're all very excited to have that come about, and the little bits are a big piece of that, one of the materials that gets used throughout many projects. As I said, it's really an integrated material. I don't have littleBits projects. I don't have littleBits curriculum. It is a material that's always available and is meant for children to make use of in a wide variety of ways. And there's a sampling of them in the screen here that I'll go through more specifically grade by grade. So in 3rd grade, that's where we begin to introduce the materials. And the way that we start this out is students work in small groups, and they get a bin of several different modules, and they're invited just to explore. No real instruction. Just see what these things can do. And as you work through the period, we ask questions about, well, what are they discovering, and how are they noticing that things work? And they realize, okay, they have to turn the power on. Does the order in which the modules are attached, does that matter? And eventually somebody figures out, well, if you want the pink ones to do anything, they've got to be in front of a green one. So input has to come before output. And talking about the simple circuits. And then giving them very simple challenges to do, like, can you make a circuit that makes noise? Can you make a circuit that moves? Can you make a circuit that responds to sound? Can you make a circuit that responds to light? Where they bring in sensors then, as well as just inputs, simple inputs like switches and buttons, and then the outputs of different lights and buzzers and motors. So they're beginning to control their environment. Out of that then, in the science curriculum, we do an exploration of light and shadow in the 3rd grade, along with tied to the scientific skill of observation. That is something that requires the use of your senses. And so we start to look at how our senses function, and then how our eyes work, how they sense light and dark, how they sense color. And there is one of the modules that we really love is the RGB LED, so red, green, blue, which matches up to the same color sensors, the same cones that the human eye has. We have red, green, and blue color sensors, and from that we're able to perceive the full spectrum of color, from red to violet. And so they're able to manipulate that, and the challenge is make all of the colors of the spectrum, including white light. And so they have to figure out the recipe for each color. And it's a great experiment, because they have to work through the conflict of what they know about mixing of pigments from art and painting. And the primary colors are red, blue, and yellow in that case, instead of red, blue, and green. And so the combinations of colors aren't necessarily as intuitive as they first expect them to be. So it becomes a genuine exploration, and they're tuning the intensity of each of those 3 color channels to create all the different lights, and they're sharing who's got the more intense red, or my red's more pink, or my red's more purple, or this white is a little blue or a little green. How do you shift that? And getting a really nice clean white LED. We can turn everything down and then actually look with a hand lens, and they can see the construction of that LED is actually 3 miniature LEDs housed inside the module. And it's because they can see the little tiny red, green, and blue bits. We use spectroscopes where they look at the color, the emission spectrum from them, and see how different portions of the light spectra are more intense with different colors than with others, yet still retain the red, green, and blues. They're all being projected or emitted. And then from there, as I said, we move into this where they're looking at light and shadow, and that's really in preparation for them to think about how the sun is affecting our lives as being the source of light. And that gets integrated in their design and build challenge that takes about 3 weeks. We set aside all of the social studies and math and science curriculum, art and shop time, and they have big chunks of time then throughout the day where they're working in small groups to design and build a project. One of the first iterations was a creature creation, and that's profiled in one of the case studies on the littleBits website, so I encourage you to take a look at that and see what we've done there. This year we did a really exciting challenge where they did puppet shows, and they created lots of different kinds of puppets, from shadow puppets to more kind of marionette type puppets. They had a stage that they built that all of the shows took place on, and then the children wanted to have different lighting effects because these were telling Native American tales about how the beaver got its tail, and also another group was looking at a typical day in the life of a woodland First Peoples village, and so they needed different lighting effects. So we had to look at, well, how does light change during the course of the day, during the course of the seasons, and how can we emulate that in our puppet shows? How can we give the look and feel of that particular type of light? What colors do we need to use? What angles does it need to come from? And so there was a whole series of investigations that they carried out with that, and they had to construct littleBits circuits to figure out how they could actually do that. So they brought in dimmers and different colored LEDs, different kinds of LEDs because they function in different ways. They started using wires to be able to spread out the sources of light, and actually found they could get multiple colored shadows because of how the different colors of light were overlapping on the background. So it was really a very exciting unit. And then the littleBits are now established in their classroom community as a material that they could use for a wide variety of things. And as they come up with ideas, they can ask for them. They can come and consult me and help them problem solve things. They can work with each other. And then that evolves into the 4th grade, where science becomes very much about asking questions and then designing a procedure that you can collect data to answer that question. So we don't use prepackaged kits. The apparatus all has to be built. So there is a real authentic engineering component within this as well. And some of the work that we do is, what is the effect of light on photosynthesis and plant growth? So naturally that builds really nicely from the 3rd grade work, where they've been familiarized with the RGB LEDs. And we also did some early work in photosynthesis and leaves in that 3rd grade curriculum. But now they're looking very closely at that function of photosynthesis. And virtually every year, the exciting part for me is what comes up is some student, and often it's the student you would least expect, poses the question, well, what good is green light? Is green light any good for photosynthesis? Because if what you're telling us is true, we see the leaves as green because they're reflecting the green light. So is the plant really using green light for photosynthesis, or is it using something else? And so from that, we created a whole set of investigations to test that out, test the effect of those 3 different color channels on light, as well as combinations of them, and found that, no, with green light, they did not convert and produce chlorophyll. They stayed yellow. And with the red and blue light, they did produce a lot of chlorophyll, and the growth was different in those plants. Looking at the direction of the light, seeing that plants are phototrophic, that they will actually bend the growing tip toward the light and grow in that direction, and that's part of how they orient themselves. And if you change that light over the course of days, you can actually manipulate the direction that the plant is growing. And out of that then comes, well, what about the roots? Because those always seem to be growing down. How do the roots know to grow down? And gravity seems to be pretty likely to be the topic. So how do we limit gravity? Well, we could fly an experiment to the International Space Station, but we don't have the direct ability to do that. It's a very expensive proposition, and it's a competitive process, so not everybody can do that. There have been many projects, however, done that you can download from NASA. Clips of plants, time-lapse clips of plants growing in microgravity and in gravity, Earth gravity. But there's actually a way that you can simulate microgravity quite easily, because microgravity is generated through free fall. And so my students designed what we call the seed spinner, and that also is on the littleBits website, where the petri dishes that we use as germination chambers are mounted in a vertical orientation, and the armature of the DC motor is glued to the center point of the petri dishes, and then we tape them closed so they don't open up. And then that slowly rotates. So now we've created a microgravity environment, and you get a really bizarre growth pattern with the seedlings under that. One of the other projects that the students question when we get into the spring, we're looking at plant reproduction and pollination, and they understand that certain animals, including bees, some other insects, and some birds, see an ultraviolet light. Humans actually can see an ultraviolet light, but our cornea filters that out. And there's a great story of the Impressionist artist Monet, who had severe cataracts, and the way to correct the cataracts was to actually remove one of his corneas so he could see again. And his paintings went through this period of the intense colors that we know him for, through a period of very muddy colors. And then once he was looking without his cataract and actually seeing ultraviolet light being reflected from the plants and the environment and the buildings and everything that he was painting, there's a new intensity of color that comes out. And so that is the part of the electromagnetic spectrum that bees are actually using. And plants must be exploiting that in some way to attract them. And sure enough, when you shine ultraviolet light on flowers, certain flowers, new patterns appear that actually direct the pollinator right to the nectaries, their food source, and pass them by the anthers and stigma so that the pollination occurs. And so that all is a great way for them to really gain firsthand understanding of that. The work with the electromagnetic spectrum continues into the fifth grade. Excuse me.
Michael, I'm so sorry.
Yes.
I'm going to have to jump in. We have about 9 minutes left, and I just want to make sure that we reserve a little bit of time for some questions. So if you have anything else to add, that was amazing.
Okay. I just So the one thing I guess that I was asked, student response, the excitement, curiosity, collaboration, the whole set of adjectives there, verbs, are really things that do genuinely come from that work. I was able to do this really because I got the buy-in from my administration, and I did that by showing them exactly what I thought we could do with them, how I saw them entering into our curriculum across the board, and also bringing them into the process where we played together with the material so they could experience them firsthand, and then and had them come in and join classes where children were using them so they could see how children were using them, what they were learning from them, what they were gaining from that experience. And then as we did the big third grade project, actually having professional development sessions with the other teachers and administrators who would be working with the students on this project. So I will flip it back over then to you, Eliza. Let's see.
Cool. Michael, thank you so much. That was such a wonderful overview. Like, it really, you just hit on so many different things. So yeah, thank you so much. And I'll jump in, and maybe we'll try and I'll hit some of the. Let me grab my questions over here. Let's see. So we'll start with. Let's try and keep the answers a little short, just because we're short on time. So the first thing would be, is this suitable for high school?
Yes. So it really is suitable for high school, and as sort of I showed you earlier with that chart, the bits themselves is something that can grow, and especially with older users. And the open challenges that we run are especially good for high school. I think the students really appreciate the independence that they have with those. And in terms of the bits themselves, very much so, very much so.
Cool. And thank you, Dave. So for Michael, this is your question. This is very logistical. How often do you replace bits?
How often do I replace bits?
Yeah.
I've actually had very few that I've had to replace. there's always one or two that get damaged in the course of a project, and so I kind of set those aside and then replace them with my next purchase year, or often I can repair them if it's not a major damage. But a big piece of it is how the ethic that we really develop around it, that this is a shared material, that it's used for prototyping, it's temporary, it's not a permanent part of your project, it's a way of adding something to the project, especially with the work that we use in science where they're really building tools. So it makes a lot of sense for them to get recycled back into the library.
Cool, thank you. Let's see, next question. Is littleBits good for a workshop setting?
I think the workshop setting is the best place for it, because the real power comes in the community learning. And in a workshop where you've got several people, different backgrounds, or even a workshop. I mean, I run my classroom like a workshop. The students are bringing all of their individual interests and talents to the table, and I've done several workshops for teachers using littleBits down at Johnson Space Center and other places. So it's very exciting, and teachers get just as engaged as students do.
Yep, amazing, wonderful. I totally agree with that. I know David's had some workshop experience too, and it's absolutely a great place for it. Okay, moving on. Let's see. Next question. Maybe we'll take a little bit more of a deep dive. So, what is the future of littleBits EU?
All right. Okay. Let's see. So, we really view this STEAM student set as laying a foundation and sort of defining our process in education. And so now that it's out, we're working on a number of different areas to essentially build on top of that foundation. And one thing that I would request from all of you in this webinar is we want to make sure that we're going in directions that are going to be as relevant and useful for you as we can. So I actually might sort of flip that question and say, if you have, if there's an area where you really want to see littleBits go into an education, you want us to dive deeper, provide more, please let us know. Let me know, so you have a place. Dave@littlebits.cc is my email address. That's dave@littlebits.cc. So you have somewhere to direct your inquiry. I would love to hear more about where you'd like us to be.
Yep, great. Thank you, Dave. Let's see, another question. Coming in. Let's see. Okay, so this participant says, I'm not a science teacher, but I want to run a workshop. Would this be too daunting for someone to do as a workshop if they are not an engineer or scientist by trade? Oh, this is such a good question.
Yes. So emphatically, no, not too daunting. And a couple of points to make there. I think one is that we've got a lot of the resources just on the basic ways that littleBits work, sort of that they snap together with magnets, they're color-coded. But I think more importantly, and as Michael pointed out, and as we've seen with a lot of educators, they will actually take away the documentation. They'll take away the instructions so that the workshop participants have the experience of figuring it out, of trial and error and trying and exploring to learn on their own. And I want to steal a little something from the Apple Store. The Apple Store has a wonderful policy where if someone comes in with a broken product and they say, this is broken, I don't know how do I fix it? And the person at the Apple Store doesn't know the answer. They are trained to say, I don't know, let's find out together. And I think that's such a wonderful experience because it does celebrate that you don't have to know all the answers, but we can figure it out, and let's dive in and figure it out. And so I think that in a workshop setting is a wonderful experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can just add, I mean, as human beings, we are all naturally scientists and inventors. That's what our species does. That's how we evolved. And so to sell yourself short as saying you're not a scientist, you're not an engineer, you're not taking into account what that big brain inside your head is really capable of doing. And that's why children get so engaged in this stuff, is because nobody's told them they can't. You are a mathematician, you are a scientist, you are an engineer, you are human. And this is a great material to help you find that voice.
Yeah, that's totally true. And I think that's an amazing place also to leave it with. You know, we are all learners. Let's all be learners and learn with our students. So thank you, Dave, and thank you, Michael, so much. This has been such a great experience. And I also wanted to tell you guys before we jump off, we do have that special discount code for you guys. If you use WEB10 and apply that on your next purchase, you will get an extra 5% off on top of your educator discount. So the educator discount is 5%, and this offer code will give you an extra 5% for a total of 10%. You should use that by next Friday also, and then it will expire. So until the next webinar, which hopefully we will be doing more of, and like Dave said, we would just love to hear from you, your thoughts. And again, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you, Dave, and thank you, Michael, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right.